Dallas, Texas, is one of the most important economic and cultural centers in the state. Its history and traditions run deep, and perhaps the most important tradition in Texas is Friday night high school football. In the late 1980s, one team rose above all the rest, but it was their inexplicable and shocking fall from grace that would ultimately become their legacy. Dallas was one of the first Texan towns built in the wake of independence. The advent of the railroad quickly made it a key business and trading center. Today, the Dallas-Fort Worth area is home to nearly 7.5 million people.
Dallas is at the forefront of everything. It's an attractive space for businesses. There's lots of employment opportunities that you can't find elsewhere. It's a booming city.
The African American community, we have about 14% of the total population of the state of Texas. We have African American judges. We have a African American mayor, city manager, chief of police, fire chief, district attorney. And so from that standpoint, we have input into the decision-making process of this county.
Texans, they're born here, they're raised here, they're educated here, and they stay here. But it also has a lot of space for transplants like myself to come in and carve out a space for ourselves and do the work. Lots of opportunity.
It's just a nice town. It's always been that way.
Over the course of the last 60 years, few events have left their mark on Dallas more than the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963.
It was such a dark time, for our country, for a president to fly into Dallas and to travel along that parade route all along Dealey Plaza and to end up getting shot and killed. Dallas did not want to be known for that. Each year around that date, you see tourists from other places come. But as for the natives living there in Dallas, it's a place that they choose to forget for obvious reasons.
For the Black community in the Oak Cliff area of Dallas, there is also a different story that changed the course of history and left its mark on everyone who lives there.
It's a period of time that will not be forgotten. It's a period of time, though, that certain aspects of, people will try to forget.
It's said that everything's bigger in Texas, and few things prove it more than the sport of football.
Football in Texas is like a religion. There's God, there's country, and there's football. When you know that the Cowboys are playing, the world stops. It's a priority, to say the least.
Dallas Cowboys is the city of Dallas's middle name to win back-to-back Super Bowls, take a break, and then come back and win it again. That was a pretty big deal down there.
On Friday nights, the people of Dallas fill high school stadiums to cheer for their local teams.
You'd have 10,000 people at the game. That's how big it was on Friday nights. It's kind of hard to describe. It's just like, I guess, being at a Super Bowl, if you can imagine the energy in a stadium.
Players just don't represent themselves or their teams. They represent the community. And winning a championship gives them bragging rights for not only the year, but for a lifetime.
And those who grew up in Oak Cliff in 1988 had a lot to cheer about because their team was the Dallas Carter Cowboys.
One of the best football teams to ever play in the state of Texas. Had, I think, 6, 7 players from that team, from that squad, to actually go to the NFL. With our leader being Jesse Armstead, of course.
As I grew up, more than anything, your dream was to play for Carter High School more so than it was to play in the NFL. You wanted to play for Carter because of their history of doing well.
Let me just put it to you in this context. There was no high school football team in America badder than these little cats.
In fact, the team and the school had become one of the reasons many Black families chose to move there.
It was a big deal to live in Oak Cliff. if you were African American. You would move into those neighborhoods just for the sole reason to say, I live in Oak Cliff.
When I first started as head coach, every year the athletes want to be at college because we winning. The parents want the kids to be over there because I help them get scholarship.
Not only did the players get to experience the winning tradition, they also got to play alongside other talented athletes.
When I got to Carter and I seen, Jesse, and then you got Derek Evans, all said, you got Lise Masters, they were confident in who they were. Just winners, great attitude, great men. It was just awesome being a part of that.
They want to be the best. And they were the best. They were the best in the whole metroplex of Dallas and probably over the state of Texas. They had one of the greatest defense ever lived.
The defense called themselves the 11-man posse, and they were more than just teammates. They were best friends.
It was a brotherhood, and we had each other back, and we protected everybody. It was awesome to know that everybody is going to do what they're supposed to do as far as their position is concerned, and that's why we were so good, because we believed in one another, we trusted one another, and everybody had their assignment, and we executed.
For Dallas Carter, winning the state championship was the goal every year. So far, the team had fallen short, but during the 1988 season, they became the odds-on favorite.
I was a receiver. I was a junior that year. The Dallas Cowboys came to our pep rally. Around the neighborhoods, they treated us like celebrities.
It spoke volumes about these boys' ability to come together and form a cohesive, truly the epitome of what team means, both on and off the field.
Not everyone was rooting for them, however.
Sometimes one of the hardest things for an all-black team is not just winning, but it's overcoming racism and prejudice.
Desegregation was already alive and well, but I think the black versus white was still there in Dallas. Racial tensions, were high anyway in that pocket.
1982, I became head coach at Carter High School. When I first went there, it was about 95% white. And before I left, we were predominant black.
Dallas schools were integrated in the early 1970s. But as black students and their families moved in, white families moved out, due to the prejudice that property values would drop and the level of crime would rise.
We started having that white flight, they called it. Every day we saw a U-Haul truck past the practice field. And the guy said, somebody must have moved next door to him. So they didn't want to be next door to no black. The whites did.
Around 1987, the high school athletic conference was realigned, and for the first time, urban and suburban schools were competing.
The Dallas Independent School District schools, they wouldn't be playing the schools in the suburbs. So we're predominantly Anglo. And so when the realignment took place, needless to say, there were a lot of people that were upset about having to play urban schools.
So these kids, now they're reaching out, to other corners of the state and beating the heck out of these teams.
For many of the players, this would be their last chance to take home the state title. And to do it, they'd have to beat the nearby powerhouse, Odessa Permian.
They were the team to beat. And you didn't just beat the team, you beat the whole damn town, because the whole town was behind those boys at Odessa Permian. When you talk in terms of football in some of the suburban areas, it's all they had. They breathed football. And if you were having a big game in those suburban communities, that's where the town made its money, because people would come in from out of town and, they would stay at the hotel in the neighborhood. They would eat at the restaurant.
Everybody was afraid to play Odessa. And I said, why I'm afraid to play Odessa? I play anybody. Now, I had attention of kids. They'll run through that wall if I tell them to. They had lots of guts, lots of determination, a whole lot of fight in themselves. Because I always taught, and I taught my son this, if you start something, be finished. You finish it.
But no one could have predicted how it would all play out. On December 22nd, 1988, Dallas police respond to an armed robbery at a local fast food restaurant. Witnesses say 3 black men entered the restaurant, demanded money from the register, then fled the scene. Unfortunately, it's a fairly common occurrence in the area.
That's the time of year that those types of things happen. No one really made a big stink about it. It was just one of many that took place.
We had about 100 business robberies a month as a rule. Young males did most of our robberies, 16, 17 on up into the early 20s. One thing about robberies, you know that if you wait long enough, the people always keep robbing until they get caught.
No one could have known that this relatively minor incident was just the beginning of a crime spree that would plague the area for nearly 6 months. And when the perpetrators are finally identified, it will tear an entire community apart. The residents of Oak Cliff, Texas, take a lot of pride in their community. Since the 1980s, this predominantly black neighborhood has worked hard to become one of the more affluent in the city.
We had a burgeoning middle class of African Americans. They had pretty good jobs making pretty good money. And you could see that as a result of some of the material things that they had, types of cars, how they kept their homes.
We had lawyers, doctors. We had lots of teachers. We had guys that is on the police for finished from Carter High School.
That area was respected as being hardworking and law-abiding citizens. A lot of the Dallas Cowboys were living in that area.
One of Oak Cliff's biggest success stories is Olympic champion Michael Johnson.
He was always that kid to mow lawns, to make ends meet and to help his family, to have him become not only a track star in his own, but to go to the Olympics to represent the entire country. He turned out to be a pride and joy of Dallas.
And the players for its high school football team, the Dallas Carter Cowboys, served as role models for many young men growing up in the area.
The star running back stayed 2 streets over. They're taking us, the younger generation in and exposing us to something that we had not seen. Every weekend, you either heard on the radio who scored the most touchdowns, or you see a player that you knew being spotlighted on News Extra. It's powerful because that's somebody who we could identify with and want to be like.
My mom was in jail at that time. My aunties stayed in the Carter district, so that's how I wound up going to Carter. Keith, Jimmy, Derek, everybody had a house, that their mom and dad were together. That was awesome for me, just to see that.
During their championship run in 1988, the Cowboys were more than just a team. They were celebrities with an entire city at their feet.
The talent at that time, it was off the chain. Just to be around great players, it just taught me how to be a winner.
Our attitudes was we couldn't be beat. I mean, even today they still saying that that's one of, if not the best high school football team in the state of Texas.
Their parents gave them wonderful lives. They had nice clothes and nice shoes.
Smelled good, kept a clean cut, wore nice jewelry, had the Jordans on. You could have your choice of the women.
Which is why the events that took place over the following year came as such a shock to everyone. On December 22nd, 1988, the Oak Cliff community had just wrapped up its football season and were looking ahead to the holidays when a local fast food restaurant is robbed. 3 months later, there was a similar armed robbery, and then another the month after that.
You wouldn't have necessarily connected these crimes together, but witnesses were describing black men wearing face masks. Sometimes there was 2 robbers, sometimes there was more, but every time they were armed and would grab cash and take off.
By the summer of 1989, a total of 21 Dallas area restaurants and shops have been hit.
The amount of money being stolen ranged from a few $100s to as much as $11,000. The description of the thieves varied, and so did the type of guns that were used. It could mean that it was not the same crew of thieves, but several. One of the restaurants was Poncho's, and it was robbed twice. The second time, the night manager said that he was locking up when 3 black men with stockings on their face entered the restaurant. He said one was holding a gun and demanded that he clean out the safe. He said he was scared for his life.
Then, on June 20th, 1989, the thieves finally make a crucial mistake when they rob a video rental store.
The cashier said that 2 men came up to the counter and pointed a gun at her. One was tall and the other was shorter. They tell her to empty the register or they'd shoot. After she gives them the money, she sees them jump into a red car that was parked outside.
The cashier is able to give investigators a detailed description of the getaway vehicle. It doesn't take long for Dallas police to find it.
It was very good description. The 2 front wheels and the 2 back wheels were different. So a couple of officers saw them and stopped them and found the gun and the money.
To their surprise, the officers immediately recognized both suspects, Derek Evans and Gary Edwards, both star players for the Dallas Carter Cowboys.
One of them was an All-American, and the other one was a very, very good player. They both had already signed the letters of intent to go to colleges, and they were big stars.
People didn't want to believe what was unfolding before their eyes. Here you had these kids who built the dynasty, and now all of a sudden, that's going to start crumbling down.
But why would 2 celebrated athletes risk their futures to commit armed robberies? And who else was involved? Law enforcement officers face difficult decisions every day. But their job can become even more difficult when the perpetrator is someone they know.
If someone commits a crime, they should be punished for it. But it's not always that simple. It's especially difficult when you're thinking about a minor who might just have made a bad decision or given in to peer pressure. An arrest could negatively affect their entire future. It's difficult, but crime has to result in consequences, no matter what the age. Even when it's kids like these who have an entire community's hopes and dreams on their shoulders.
In June of 1989, 2 players for the Dallas Carter football team, Derek Evans and Gary Edwards, are arrested after committing an armed robbery.
I don't think they really knew what they were doing. They left too many clues. We would eventually tied it to them if we hadn't caught those 2. I think it would eventually all come together.
Over the next few weeks, police will discover it was part of a much larger crime spree involving several other players. The question on everyone's mind is why.
These weren't poor kids. These weren't destitute kids. So I think people were grasping for straws, trying to figure out a way to justify what had taken place.
Some felt those reasons could be found by returning to the fall of 1988 and the team's controversial run for their first state championship. Going into the playoffs, the Dallas Carter Cowboys are ranked number 1.
Carter's defense put fear in every other team in the league, especially with linebackers like Jesse Armstead and Derek Evans.
You had talent stacked up on top of talent.
Their success is due in part to the exceptional head coach, Freddie James.
Because he loved us, he was strict on us because he wanted us to make it. He wanted us to be successful. We looked to him as a leader because he was our leader, because he was the coach.
I had lots of fun, good atmosphere at Carter High School. You got to have a good relationship with the parents, the kids at the school. They got to give you respect, and they did respect me.
The players have become more than teammates. They're brothers.
We hung around each other. We ate at each other's house. We had each other back. We were going to protect one another.
Our coaches didn't have to tell us to practice. We would compete with each other. We would go at it, just man on man, one on one. I think really that's what made and what makes Carter what it is.
The prospect of an underdog, all-black team rising above and bringing home the state championship makes the Cowboys popular beyond the borders of their Oak Cliff community.
There's this team that's the underdog. They're African American. They come from a community, that didn't get a whole lot of respect. And they're still winning games. And then you start rooting for them. And so we're all sitting on the edge of our seats. We just want to know, did Carter win?
No school in the inner city in the history of Dallas, Texas has ever won state championship at the top Class A, ever.
But it also earns them some powerful enemies.
The football team at Carter suddenly started beating all the local football teams, and there were people in the stands that just weren't rooting for them. It had to be very difficult for these young black high school football players to work so hard and find themselves not being supported by their community.
The Cowboys' first playoff game is scheduled for Friday, November 11th. But early that week, the school receives some unexpected visitors.
We get ready to practice. I saw it in the Channel 8 and Channel 4. I thought they were coming to film my practice. The sports writer got out of the car and said, "Coach, you realize you have an ineligible player on the team?" That's the first time I heard of it. Coming to you telling me about the bad grade one of my players had received.
I remember our coach being angry and telling them to get out. Something in my mind is saying that whatever they brought to Coach James, they didn't just make it up.
We were trying to figure out what was going on. They were saying that we might be out the playoffs.
Acting on an anonymous tip, the league office has determined that the Carter Cowboys running back, Gary Edwards, is in violation of the no pass, no play rule.
You had to maintain a grade point average of 70 or above in order to qualify to participate in UIL sanctioned activities.
If you were below that, even by 1 point, you could not play.
Gary had taken an algebra test a week prior and thought he had passed, but investigators discovered that he had actually failed.
Somehow it got to the DISD that we was playing with an ineligible player. And so all of the games that allowed us to be in the playoffs, we had to forfeit, which would cause us to have to basically be disqualified from the playoffs.
But for many, the timing of the investigation seems suspicious.
If someone knew about the grade, why did they wait until the playoffs to say something about it?
It sure was, in the eyes of many, a big coincidence. That's where the race thing started coming up. Parents started saying, these boys are doing their best, they're doing great, and now you want to knock them and come up with this.
It may have exposed us to how far one will go in order to show that we don't desire to see you succeed.
Convinced that Gary and the team is being treated unfairly, Oak Cliff parents demand a review.
There was a school board meeting about this. You better believe it was standing room only. They're making all this noise about these kids here in the 11th hour because of the color of their skin. They're on the verge of victory here and history, and you're trying to stop that.
The grade wasn't actually a number. It was marked NC for not complete.
People talk about this teacher who had his own grading curve. How did he achieve this? Or did somebody just change this so that he could play because he was a star player? There are sports enthusiasts who love, a winning team. That superintendent, under pressure from those parents, from the entire community, had to do something to make sure that the decision that he made, the final outcome, would be sound and would be satisfactory to everybody.
Under pressure from the entire community, the superintendent decides that Gary did in fact pass, which means the team is once again eligible to play. The Cowboys are back in the playoffs, but the controversy is far from over. After the superintendent's ruling in favor of the Dallas Carter Cowboys, the residents of Oak Cliff rally around their team, and the players are more determined than ever to win.
They're seniors, and they had said this from their freshman year, that would be the year that we would win state.
They're carrying the weight and the pride of the city on their shoulders.
The Cowboys' first-round match is against Plano East, but the chaos and controversy seems to have put them off their game. At halftime, they are tied 7-7.
It's hard enough to compete at that level when you're playing your best, and clearly they weren't. But there wasn't a player on that team that was about to give up.
They were always the comeback kids. Freddie James had a way of convincing those boys that, look, if we're going to win this thing, take a dump or get off the pot.
In the second half, Gary Edwards answers the call, scoring the touchdown that seals the victory for Dallas Carter. But off the field, the battle over the team's eligibility is just getting started.
The league office did not agree with the superintendent's decision and decided to take it to court.
A lot of it was legal maneuvering. Well, if you present it this way, it looks like he passed. But then somebody else would come back and say, well, if you present it this way, though, he didn't pass. So there was a lot of that going back and forth.
The adversity that they were going through was not only felt by them as the players, it was felt by the entire community.
The parents of Oak Cliff are determined to fight for their boys and show up to the hearings with their own lawyer.
We had to fight in the courtroom in order for the kids to continue to be able to play on the football field.
I was a nervous wreck, thinking about whether or not we're going to play the next ball game. I've been nervous every day.
With only hours before the scheduled kickoff of their second-round game, Dallas Carter still doesn't know whether they'll be allowed to play.
We got on the bus 3 times, and they called in and said, y'all get off the bus, y'all not eligible to play. We get off the bus and go back in the dressing room, the kids carry clothes back. And then here come the school policeman, come up and said, Coach, you can get back on the bus.
It was, light switch on, light switch off. You're in, you're out. It was just tiresome.
The team lawyer immediately files an injunction, putting the game on hold. The case is referred to a state judge who will make the final determination. In the meantime, Dallas Carter remains in the playoffs.
They let us know when we're back in, but we're not going to play today. We're going to play tomorrow.
The next afternoon, the Cowboys head to the Cotton Bowl to face the Samuel Spartans.
You know what kind of pressure that put on me. It put on the players, too. Although I felt like we had a better team than Samuel. We go out there and we play. Those kids played terrible. Samuel led us in the first quarter. I told him, you all go out there and have fun. Play like you're playing Sand Lock backyard. Play like you want to play. Both those kids jumped up and hollered and went back on that field. The first play was scrimmage. Samuel threw that ball and Jesse Umstead intercept that ball and return it into the end zone for a touchdown. And after that, boy, they tore Samuel up. We whooped them good.
The Cowboys shut out the Spartans 28-0, keeping the championship hopes alive.
Coach James kept us focused and not let us worry about the politics of Texas football.
They beat the school, and then that school would get involved in the litigation, trying to get them tossed out so they could replace Carter in the playoffs. And we'd fight them off left and right, week after week.
Following the game, public opinion swings in the Cowboys' favor. The timing of the allegations and the racial undertones involved makes them everyone's favorite underdogs.
They didn't stop playing. They were still beating everybody's pants off. Everywhere they played, they were pretty tough little cookies.
In the quarterfinals, the Cowboys narrowly defeat Marshall, setting up a showdown against one of the strongest East Texas football programs, Odessa Permian.
Kids were so riled up that there was talk about at least a half a day becoming a student holiday. Bragging rights were on the line. Carter had never, ever won a title game. This was a big deal.
The game truly lived up to the hype. It was a knockdown, drag-out fight from start to finish.
Dallas Carter wins 14-9, but the question still remains, will they be allowed to play in the championship?
It came down to the state judge. He decided that the superintendent was the only one who could truly decide the validity of the grade.
The superintendent ruled that Gary Edwards passed, so that was the final verdict.
It was an order that reverberated around the entire state of Texas, and the kids were overjoyed.
We can just go on and play and not even worry about whether we was in or we was out. It was on, because now we focused. Now we can go and get this championship.
At noon on Saturday, December 17th, 1988, Dallas Carter meets Converse Judson in Texas Stadium to determine the state champion. This time, the outcome is never in doubt.
First and 10, and it's a big one.
Dallas Carter walks away with a 31-14 victory.
It was gorgeous. It was awesome feeling.
Means a lot. Makes everybody proud. There's a lot of celebrating going on.
After the ball game, I said, now you the state champ, you the best in Texas. Keep your head up high because everybody is on you. We just a happy group of people.
But their moment of triumph would only make their fall from grace that much harder to take. Fame can often change people, giving them an inflated sense of their own self-importance. It can even make them feel as though they're above the law.
You see some people these days who think that they can get away with anything, that no one's going to hold them accountable. Unfortunately, sometimes that's true. Whether they're rich enough to pay for the best lawyers or they've got friends in high places, they get treated differently, even if they've committed a serious crime. There have been a few cases recently that we saw famous people get off with a slap on the wrist, where you and I would go to prison. But those players at Dallas Carter just weren't going to be that lucky.
For the first time, the Dallas Carter Cowboys are the state champions, proving that this team and their neighborhood of Oak Cliff can never be underestimated again. Everywhere they go, the players are treated like royalty.
I kicked it when I got the quarter high. Baby, it was on. Everybody loves a winner.
We was considered like celebrities. Not only did they treat us like that, we expected it.
In the months following their historic victory, 21 Carter players are signed to full scholarships by college teams.
Derek Evans signed with Tennessee. And the big deal was that he did it, from his mama's hot tub, wearing the bling bling.
Some thought this was cocky, but some thought it was just part of his charm and his character.
They say cocky, I say confident. They just jealous because we was winning all the time.
They like to wear the jewelry and pretty shoes, and they were stylish type kids.
Some of the Carter High boys were living lavish lifestyles, and people in the community were beginning to wonder how. And on June 20th, 1989, a pair of arrests revealed the shocking truth. They were stealing it.
Some of the players had started committing some robberies 5 days after the championship.
Soon after the first arrest, more Carter High team members were charged in connection with the crime spree. 6 of the 10 suspects arrested played on the Carter High School football team. Gary Edwards, Derek Evans, Keith Campbell, Patrick P.K. Williams, Eric Andrews, and Carlos Allen.
They came and picked us up from our house. They had us on the news, so they showed our faces. And man, it was just like, dang, is this really happening?
Because they were stars in their own right and in their own minds in the community, I think the attitude was, well, we can do anything we want. We own this town. Negative influences started to creep in.
One of Carter's star football players, P.K. Williams, worked at a local fast food restaurant and saw an opportunity to make some quick money.
Not that we needed the gold chain. It was just lust of the eye that we wanted to have it. And that's when I came up with the plan on how we can afford this stuff.
Williams enlists the aid of his closest teammates, Carlos Allen and Keith Campbell.
I was like, you lost your damn mind. Either you're gonna die or you're going to prison. I knew initially my first answer was no. And after thinking about it, I said, all right. They wanted to have some money for Christmas.
On the night of the robbery, one of them let the others in the back door. And then they walked in with their faces covered, holding a gun, and robbed the cash register.
The heist is a success. No one ever suspects the beloved Carter High football players were involved.
So Saturday morning, the police came in, and my manager introduced me to them and said, this is one of the Carter High football. So we didn't even talk about what happened Friday night. They wanted to know where I was going to school.
Between the adrenaline rush and the $700 payout, the boys are hooked and plan to do it again.
At first, it was just 3 of us. Then we got more of our homeboys involved doing robberies. You had different groups.
But some players, like All-American Jesse Armstead, are unwilling to risk their futures.
He says, no, man, I don't roll like that. I'm not with you guys. Y'all do it on your own.
Jesse Armstead did not get involved because he had been caught shoplifting. And when he saw the hurt on his mother's face, he made the decision that he would never commit another crime. So when the Carter boys came to him and asked him to join, he declined. Jesse was headed to play college football for the Miami Hurricanes, and he actually ended up playing 12 years in the NFL.
Williams soon gets a new job at a Mexican restaurant, the perfect place for another robbery.
We had a couple of our homeboys to go in because we couldn't go in. We thought they would probably recognize us.
They staged a robbery with an employee who works at the restaurant to say, we're going to come in and we'll make it look like we are robbing you. When we stick them up, you just follow our lead, tell us how to get the money, and we'll get it.
This time, the group walks away with $6,000. After one more robbery, they decide to stop. But 1 month later, they're back at it.
Prom came around. A couple of us were working at a restaurant. The conversation came up again. Another robbery occurred, and now you have people that see us with stuff like jewelry, Air Jordan warm-ups, $200, $300, $400, $500 worth of cash in the pocket. So, people wondering what they're doing. As kids, we only think for the moment. We ain't thinking, 5, 6 years down the line. I'm just thinking, if I get away right now, I'm good. And because it was so easy, there's nothing that stops you.
The more robberies they get away with, the bolder the players get. Eventually, they don't even bother to cover their faces.
That's how emboldened they were, to just walk in, brazen, and put a gun in somebody's face and say, hey, give me your money.
You point a pistol smell, they're going to open the cash register pretty quick. It represents the power that you have over the clerk, especially these Carter robberies. They weren't poor boys, but they got a kick out of these robberies.
Everyone treated them like that they could do no wrong. It's their city. And I know it's hard to believe, but they probably didn't even realize that they were hurting anybody.
It's all fun and games until they are caught. Now it's just a question of what their punishments will be. The arrest of 6 Carter High School football players make headlines all over Dallas. The athletes, along with 4 other area high school students, are charged with a total of 21 armed robberies.
There were some boys from Carter that weren't football players. And there were boys from Hillcrest High School. They had gone to school with the Carter boys in grade school. They all knew each other.
It's impossible to understand how these young men with such bright futures could choose to throw it all away.
This took my family by surprise. My grandmother had to pawn her ring to get me out.
It's like the community rose to cheer these kids. You know, the community flocked to its knees when all of this occurred. It took the wind out of our sails.
All of the teens involved enter guilty pleas. On September 22nd, 1989, they file into a packed Dallas courtroom for sentencing.
We were fearful, frightful, about, our future because we didn't know the judge, never been in trouble.
Their lawyers thought at first offender, you're going to get probation or slap on the wrist.
The judge doesn't show any mercy.
You had witnesses, people who stood there and said, oh, I felt like I was going to die. There was a gun in my face.
I remember him addressing Gary first. It was like, y'all been getting breaks for a while. It ends right here. If stupidity were a crime, you all deserve a life sentence.
Gary Edwards is sentenced to 16 years. Derek Evans receives 20 years.
The judge wanted to see some remorse. Didn't get a whole lot of that out of Campbell.
I remember him calling me a sociopath and that I scared him. He gave me 25 years.
Carlos Allen gets 13 years. Patrick Williams, 14. And Eric Andrews, who turned himself into police, is the only defendant that does not receive jail time.
I was stunned. My co-counsels were stunned. The entire community was stunned.
That was very unusual for first-time offenders.
Kids ended up going to the penitentiary, losing scholarships, losing the ability to be able to go to the NFL and getting an education that would have continued their ascension as a citizen in this country.
But that isn't the end of the story for the Dallas Carter Cowboys. Following the convictions, the league once again appeals the superintendent's grade decision. And this time they win.
The team got the word that, you know what? At the end of the day, you are ineligible. And so that title trophy that you got in 1988 does not count.
They took the state championship away from us, and that was a year later.
It's awarded instead to their opponent, Converse Judson. The rest of the team is devastated.
We took basically the punishment for what happened the year before.
You have, 60 plus players on a team. To be a member of that team and to see it go up in flames on the part of just a few, it's a hurtful feeling. That's something they'll live with for the rest of their lives.
Today, the Carter boys have finished serving their time and emerged as wiser men. They have gone on to become coaches, businessmen, youth ministers, and policemen. And now they use their story to encourage today's youth to not make their same mistakes.
We are all successful. We are husbands. We love our families. We love those that surround us. So we are better men now. What I'm proud about is that nobody went back.
I learned a lot down there. I understand what the value of your word is, how important your character is. I moved from being cold-hearted and didn't really care to I got so much empathy in me now. I truly apologize.
They weren't bad children, students, or adults, but they made bad decisions and bad choices. We all fall down. I think you see their true character by getting up and going on and being successful. That shows the resiliency of what was coming out of Carter and what's still coming out of Carter.